For years, it felt like my brain was a radio permanently stuck between stations. Not silent, not clear, just constant static underneath everything. I did everything you're supposed to do when you want your life to change. I tried to play a better song. I had the affirmations, the gratitude journal, the vision boards. I disciplined my mornings. I optimized my routines. I told myself to just think positive. On the surface, I was functioning. Underneath, there was still that burnout, subtle anxiety, a quiet but persistent feeling of being stuck. The life I wanted felt like a clear, beautiful melody somewhere in the distance. But what I was hearing was distortion. And the hardest part wasn't the noise. It was the story I told myself about it. Maybe I'm not trying hard enough. Maybe I don't want it badly enough. Maybe I'm just not disciplined enough. So I pushed harder. More effort, more strategy, more control. But the more I tried to overpower the static, the louder it seemed to get. Then a different thought surfaced, not dramatic, just simple. What if the issue isn't the song I'm trying to play, but the frequency I'm tuned to? What if my brain isn't broken, but operating exactly as it was trained to? That idea didn't feel mystical. It felt relieving. Because if this was a frequency problem, then it wasn't about trying harder. It was about learning how to change the station. Let's begin with the station most of us know very well. In neuroscience, the state we've been describing is largely associated with beta brainwaves. Beta activity typically ranges between 12 and 30 hertz. It's the rhythm of focused attention, decision-making, language processing, and problem-solving. It's the frequency we rely on to function in the modern world. There is nothing inherently wrong with beta. In fact, it's essential. The difficulty begins when the nervous system forgets how to soften out of it. Under prolonged stress, the brain can shift into what researchers refer to as high beta activity. This is not dramatic or visible from the outside. You can appear calm, competent, even successful. But internally, the system remains subtly vigilant. High beta is the physiology of ongoing alertness. It narrows attention. It prioritizes scanning. It increases mental speed. Stress hormones circulate more frequently. Muscles hold mild tension. Breathing becomes slightly shallow. Thoughts move quickly and often repetitively. Again, this is not dysfunction. It is adaptation. The nervous system is designed around safety. If it has learned through experience that the world requires constant readiness, then maintaining alertness becomes a protective strategy. Over time, what began as temporary protection can become a baseline state. And when that happens, the static doesn't feel dramatic. It feels normal. You might wake up already thinking. You might find it difficult to fully relax, even during rest. You might notice that your mind prefers solving problems to simply being present. From the inside, it can feel like effort is the only way forward. If something isn't working, you push. If you feel stuck, you optimize. If anxiety rises, you attempt to think your way out of it. But effort layered on top of high alert often reinforces the very state you're trying to leave. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because the body interprets sustained effort as continued threat. When the nervous system operates from chronic high beta, perception shifts subtly. Attention becomes problem-oriented. Creativity narrows. Patience shortens. The future can feel urgent rather than expansive. This is not a character issue. It is a regulatory pattern. The brain strengthens what it repeatedly experiences. Neural networks that fire together become more efficient together. If stress has been frequently activated, the pathway becomes well practiced, familiar, easy to access, and familiarity can feel like identity. But a practiced state is not the same thing as who you are. The static you've been hearing is not evidence of something broken. It's the sound of a system that has been working hard for a long time. When we use the metaphor of a radio tuned to the wrong station, we are not criticizing the brain. We are simply acknowledging that it may have learned to stay on a frequency that once felt necessary. High beta is useful in moments that require precision and speed. It becomes heavy when it becomes home. And the important thing to remember is this: the nervous system is dynamic. The same plasticity that allowed this pattern to form also allows new patterns to emerge. If your dial has been resting on survival, it is not because you failed to evolve. It is because your system was prioritizing safety, and safety is never the enemy. The question isn't how to force the static away. The question is whether the system can gradually experience enough internal safety to soften its grip and remember that other stations exist. Nothing needs to be attacked, only gently retuned. If high beta feels like static, then the next question isn't how to silence it by force. It's how to gently shift the dial. The nervous system does not respond well to aggression, even self-aggression. Trying to defeat anxiety or overpower stress often keeps the system activated. What actually creates change is regulation, gradual downshifting, a felt sense of safety. In terms of brainwave patterns, one of the first transitions available to us is alpha. Alpha brainwaves operate between roughly 8 and 12 Hz. They tend to emerge when the body is awake, but relaxed when attention softens rather than narrows. If beta is focused engagement with the outer world, alpha is relaxed awareness of both the outer and inner world at the same time. You've likely experienced alpha without naming it. It's the feeling right before sleep, when thoughts slow but you're still conscious. It's the quiet clarity during a walk in nature. It's the state that arises when you pause after a long exhale and nothing feels urgent for a moment. Alpha is not dramatic. It's subtle. In this frequency, the nervous system begins to shift from sympathetic dominance, the fight-or-flight orientation, toward parasympathetic balance. Heart rate steadies. Muscular tension decreases. The mind becomes less rigid. Perception widens. When alpha stabilizes, something important happens. You become less identified with your thoughts. Instead of being pulled by every mental signal, you begin to observe them. There is space between stimulus and response. Not because you forced that space into existence, but because the system is no longer bracing. In the radio metaphor, alpha is the point where the static begins to thin. The signal is not yet fully clear, but you can sense that clarity is possible. And from here, another frequency becomes accessible: theta. Theta brainwaves typically range from about 4 to 8 Hz. They are most commonly associated with REM sleep and deep meditation states. But theta is not mystical in itself. It reflects a mode of brain activity in which the boundary between conscious processing and deeper emotional memory networks becomes more permeable. In theta, the analytical mind relaxes its dominance. Patterns stored in long-term memory beliefs, emotional associations, conditioned responses become more accessible. This matters because much of our station is not chosen consciously. It is inherited from repetition, from experiences, from interpretations formed long ago. When the brain enters theta, there is often an increase in neural plasticity. The system becomes more receptive to new associations, not because we forced new beliefs into it, but because the rigidity softens. If beta is trying to solve problems at the surface level, theta allows reorganization at a deeper layer. But this is not about rewriting your personality overnight. It is not about installing new affirmations like software updates. It is about creating conditions where the nervous system feels safe enough to explore different internal states. From alpha into theta. The shift is not effortful. It is permissive. You are not commanding the radio to obey you. You are learning how to listen carefully enough to notice when the signal begins to clear. And the remarkable thing is these frequencies are not rare. They are part of your natural neurological spectrum. The same brain that learned high alert also contains the circuitry for calm integration. Nothing new needs to be imported, only remembered. The dial has more than one position, and your system already knows how to move when it feels safe enough to do so. You can't change a pattern you're not aware of. So before any technique, before any breathwork or meditation, the real beginning is simple noticing. At different points in your day, you might pause not dramatically, just briefly, and ask yourself, what station am I on right now? Feel into your body without trying to correct anything. Is there tension in your jaw? Are your shoulders slightly lifted? Is your breathing shallow or uneven? Then notice your thoughts. Are they moving quickly, revisiting something unresolved, anticipating the next problem before it arrives? If so, that may be the beta station. Not wrong, not bad. Just activated. Instead of judging it, you simply acknowledge it. Ah, there's the static. Interesting. That small moment of awareness matters more than it seems. When you notice the pattern, you are no longer fully inside it. There is now a subtle space between the experience and the one observing the experience. And in that space, regulation becomes possible. From there, the most direct way to influence your internal state is through the breath. Breathing reflects the state of the nervous system. Under stress, it becomes shallow and rapid. When safety increases, it naturally slows and deepens, because breathing sits at the bridge between voluntary and automatic processes. Adjusting it gently can begin to influence everything downstream. One simple rhythm is box breathing. You exhale slowly. Inhale through your nose for 4 counts. Hold softly for 4. Exhale for 4. Then pause again for 4. The counts are less important than the steadiness. The goal is not intensity. It is rhythm. As the breath becomes even, the body often follows. The heart rate steadies. The muscles soften slightly. The mind becomes less sharp at the edges. You are not forcing your brain into alpha. You are giving it the conditions in which alpha can emerge on its own. After a few minutes, you may notice that thoughts are still present, but they are less compelling. There is more room between them. The sense of urgency lowers. This is the beginning of a frequency shift. From here, many people believe meditation requires silencing the mind entirely. But trying to stop thoughts often activates more effort. And effort can reintroduce tension. Instead of attempting to control thinking, you can gently redirect attention toward a felt state. Rather than focusing on what you want to obtain, shift toward how you want to feel. Not the promotion, not the relationship, not the external result, but the internal quality. Peace steadiness, openness, a sense of enoughness. Then ask quietly, what does that feel like in my body? Let the answer come as sensation rather than analysis. Perhaps there is warmth in your chest. Perhaps your shoulders drop a fraction lower. Perhaps your breath deepens without effort. Stay with that sensation, even if it's faint. When the nervous system experiences a regulated state repeatedly, even for short intervals, the associated neural circuits strengthen. This is the quiet power of neuroplasticity. The brain adapts to what it practices. States that were once unfamiliar become more accessible. What required intention begins to feel natural. You are not carving a new identity into your mind. You are allowing the system to remember a state it already knows how to produce. Over time, this practice changes something subtle but meaningful. The dial no longer feels stuck. You begin to recognize when static returns, and instead of fighting it, you know how to respond. Not with force, not with urgency, but with awareness, breath, and a steady return. The skill is not staying calm forever. The skill is knowing that when the signal drifts, you can gently retune it. And the more often you do, the more familiar that clearer station becomes, not as an achievement, but as a place your nervous system learns it is safe to inhabit. When your internal state begins to stabilize, something subtle starts to happen. Not outside of you, at least not at first. Inside. When the nervous system is no longer bracing, perception widens. Under chronic high beta, attention narrows around threat. The brain filters for problems, inconsistencies, unfinished tasks. It scans for what might go wrong. This isn't pessimism. It's pattern recognition shaped by stress. But when regulation increases, when alpha and even brief theta states become more accessible, the filtering system shifts. You begin to notice different information. The same room feels slightly less heavy. The same conversation feels less confrontational. The same opportunity that once felt intimidating now feels possible. Nothing external has changed yet. But the signal you are broadcasting internally has. The brain is constantly predicting reality based on past experience. Neuroscience calls this predictive processing. We don't simply react to the world we anticipated. We see what we expect to see. We feel what our nervous system is prepared to feel. So when your internal baseline shifts from vigilance to steadiness, your predictions shift with it. And when predictions shift, interpretation shifts. This is where people sometimes use language like law of resonance. That phrase can sound mystical. But at a psychological level, it describes something measurable. Your perception is shaped by your internal state. A radio can only receive clearly on the frequency it is tuned to. If the dial is set to static, music feels distant. When the dial is adjusted, the music was never created in that moment, it was always broadcasting. You simply couldn't receive it clearly. In the same way, opportunities, connections, ideas, and possibilities may have been present in your environment long before you noticed them. When the nervous system softens, attention becomes less defensive. You begin to perceive nuance. Creativity returns not because you forced it, but because cognitive flexibility increases when the brain is not in survival mode. You might find yourself responding instead of reacting, listening instead of preparing your defense, considering options that previously felt invisible. From the outside, this can look like life improving. From the inside, it feels like coherence. Coherence is when your thoughts, emotions, and physiological state are no longer pulling in different directions. The signal is unified, not perfect, not constantly positive, but internally consistent. And coherence changes behavior. When you feel steady, you speak differently, you decide differently, you tolerate uncertainty differently. Small risks feel manageable instead of catastrophic. Over time, these micro-adjustments accumulate, not because the universe rearranged itself, but because your perception, choices, and nervous system baseline shifted. There is something quietly empowering about this realization. It removes the need to control every external variable. It shifts the focus inward, not in a self-absorbed way, but in a regulatory way. If the signal changes, the experience changes. And here is the part that often goes unnoticed when you feel safer internally. Other people often feel that too. Nervous systems are relational. Regulation is contagious. Calm invites calm. The clearer your internal station becomes, the less effort you need to exert to be understood, to be present, to create momentum. You are not forcing reality to obey you. You are participating differently in it. And participation, not pressure, is what gradually alters the landscape of your life. The station was never about controlling the world. It was about stabilizing the signal within it. When that signal becomes coherent, life doesn't necessarily become easy, but it does become less distorted. And clarity, more than force, is what allows meaningful change to unfold. For a long time, you may have believed the problem was effort. That if you just tried harder, optimized more, thought more positively, something would finally click. But if your brain is a radio, then effort alone was never the solution. You can't force clarity by turning up the volume on static. You adjust the frequency, and that adjustment doesn't happen through pressure. It happens through awareness, through breath, through creating moments where your nervous system feels safe enough to soften. The static you've been hearing was not a personal flaw. It was a protective pattern. High beta was your system doing its job, scanning, preparing, protecting. It simply stayed active longer than necessary. And when survival becomes the baseline, life can begin to feel heavier than it needs to. But the dial was never broken. Alpha is available. Theta is available. Regulation is available. Not as mystical states, not as peak experiences, but as natural capacities already built into your biology. When you learn to notice the station you're on, when you learn to steady your breath, when you practice inhabiting a regulated state, even briefly, the signal begins to change. And when the signal changes, perception changes. When perception changes, choices change. When choices change, life gradually reorganizes around a different baseline. Not instantly, not magically, but coherently. You don't have to silence the static forever. You only need to recognize when you've drifted and remember that you can return. Gently, again and again. Over time, what once felt like effort begins to feel like alignment. What once felt like noise begins to quiet. And the melody you were straining to hear doesn't arrive from outside. It was always broadcasting. You were simply learning how to tune. And perhaps the real shift isn't becoming someone new. It's realizing that beneath the static, your system has always known how to find clarity. The question is not whether the station exists. It's whether you're willing to turn the dial. If something in this video resonated with you, there's no need to make a dramatic change. Just carry one small awareness into this week. Maybe it's the question, what station am I on right now? Maybe it's one slow breath before you respond. Maybe it's simply recognizing that your nervous system is trying to protect you. You don't have to reinvent your life overnight. You can just begin to rest your hand on the dial. And if you'd like, you can share one word, one feeling you want to gently return to this week. Not as a declaration, just as a quiet reminder. We're not trying to become someone else. We're learning how to tune the signal we already carry, so life feels clearer from the inside out.